Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. James Holmes with Black Lion, and the hits just keep on coming. Some of you guys will recognize this gentleman here, and maybe some of you might not, but if you don't, you probably need to get to know him. This is the one and only, the Honorable Mychael Rambo. How you doing, Brother Rambo?
I'm doing very well. I appreciate your taking some time out of your schedule because you are a very busy man in your own right, to allow me to speak to your audience and your viewership and to be able to say a little bit more about my journey and who I am as an artist. I am a theater professional. I am a community organizer, an event planner, and master of ceremony and auctioneer. I wear a lot of hats, do a lot of different things, but my passion and my core rest firmly in a space of artistry. So everything I do is done with a sense of my artistic purpose.
Absolutely. For those that maybe aren't in the Twin Cities area, he's Brother Rambo's a really big name here. I've actually been going to several of his productions through the years. Me and my wife, a lot of his theater productions. Never thought I'd have the opportunity to actually sit down and chop it up with him. So this is a pretty cool thing. This brother is like extremely accomplished, Emmy awards, very very heavy thinker, and that's kind of what we wanted to do today. But before we get into some of the things that are going on in Minnesota right now. Tell us a little bit about your story because I think your story is a strong, powerful story, and it's a great motivator for a lot of our young people out there.
Sure. Well, James, I thank you for like I said, giving such a great platform for our viewers who are, many of them are young people. Some of them may be the parents of young people, whoever they might be. When you ask me about my story, it is versed with trial and tribulation, but with a lot of joy and celebration to boot. I moved here from Texas about 32 winters ago, and so I've been here for that length of time. I arrived here having been a resident of Austin, Texas, where I resided and went to the University of Texas at Austin. Got my first degree in marketing, went back, got one in finance, and was doing really reasonably well in life. I had amassed a comfortable background and professional status, but this was in the 80s, in the heyday of business in Texas and across the country. Uh, America's business was business, and it still kind of is that today. But for me, one of the businesses I got into, sadly, was just not really taking the best of care of myself. And because I had far more money than a young man knew what to do with, and far more issues related to my own, for lack of other words, as African American men, our culture, the systemic racism and the nature of the strata and structural racism in our country leaves black men often feeling incomplete, not valuable, and having degrees of self-loathing. I can't speak for any of the viewers, but for myself, I had absorbed some messages, internal messages that were not fruitful, that weren't productive for me. I say all that to say simply that for someone who had a very good upbringing, my family's from Rambo, Texas, a freedman town settled by freed slaves. So I'm actually a Rambo from Rambo, Texas, which is in East Texas near Shreveport, Louisiana. But that aside, even with this rich heritage and cultural upbringing, I found myself immersed in drug addiction and alcoholism. I left a, a wonderful lifestyle and found myself on the streets in Austin, not having anything, not having the support of my family, um, until they sent me to Minnesota with a one-way ticket to go to treatment to a place called Hazelden. And Hazelden is one of many treatment centers here in Minnesota. And one of the things that many who are viewing will recognize is that to be able to be it, you have to be able to see it. And to see it, you must believe it. And what I came to find out when I got to Hazelden, I was the only African American in the entire place,
Wow.
on the entire campus.
Wow.
So it was hard for me to believe that I'd ever get sober, but I've been 32 years sober after leaving Hazelden, and have transferred and turned my life over to the care of myself and to a power that's greater than me. And I don't want to presume anyone is a Christian or any other thing, but I do say that I know that there is a God and I'm not him. And that's what's taken my life and transformed it. I was able to get through Hazelden, but I did see that there was possibility and promise. And possibility and promise comes with perseverance. And so if you have a vision, a dream for yourself, if you meet it with perseverance, that's stick-to-itiveness, that is being able to continue to hold true with your feet firmly planted and engaged in an objective, a goal, an end point. And my end point was I wanted to get back on my feet again. So I left Hazelden, came to St. Paul, Minnesota, was living here at a place called Dorothy Day, which is a homeless shelter here in downtown St. Paul, because I was unable to go back to Texas. And my family had not, we were estranged, and so that means that we were not talking. And so it took a while before we were able to return to some of the trust and some of the amicable, the ability to relate to each other. So I was living in Dorothy Day, and I got a job, and then I went from walking on the streets at night, waiting to get into Dorothy Day at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening, to actually, there's a place in downtown St. Paul called Rice Park, across the street from the Broadway Theater. Turns out, as fate would have it, as God would have it, and as the ancestors would have it, I ended up going from hanging out in the park across from the Broadway to a year later performing at the Broadway Theater. So I went from homelessness to that situation of being able to perform in a space that
God is awesome.
Yeah, that really I never dreamed of. So the long and the short is I went from that to really kind of a meteoric kind of ascent. My trajectory went from the Broadway to the Guthrie Theater to Penumbra Theater to Carnegie Hall in New York City, to tours around Europe and Africa and South America, to, as James mentioned, winning an Emmy Award. I went from homelessness to home ownership. We're actually doing this interview, this conversation. It's not an interview, it's a conversation between brothers in my home.
That's right. It's a conversation. So, a conversation, an intellectual conversation.
Yeah, and I've appreciated the opportunity to share just a little bit of my background, because what's happened is that I've realized the promises that come with adhering to a principle and a practice of behavior that gives me the outcome I wished. And I wished for something, and then I believed that it could happen. I saw myself doing it, and I became it, and I'm still becoming. And that's kind of a part and parcel of my journey, and I'm really excited about what the future has in store for me. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota. I teach theater there, and I've been there for 18 years, too.
Wow. So, if I'm short for words, it's because, I'll be transparent. I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to be here with this kind of power, with this kind of talent, with all these intellectual muscles in this room. I'm the lucky one. I'm the lucky one to be able to talk to somebody like Brother Rambo here, and I hope you guys are absorbing it. And I hope you caught that last thing that he said, where he talked about believing it and going after it and getting it. Because whatever it is, we've talked about this a lot, you guys, however you package it, that's still what it comes down to. That really is.
Yeah, it really does, James. It comes down to doing the work, the sweat equity. You know, as a person with a degree in finance, there's something called ROI, return on investment. And there's an investment that comes from putting your intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and physical energy toward an outcome. And that outcome, the returns from that, is called the return on your investment. And the return on your investment allows you to apply that return toward other ultimate and eventual returns on that same sort of investment. It parlays itself and progresses, and it moves forward in smaller or larger increments. All that to say, if you put your skin in the game, step forward, do what you do, you can continue doing what you do by doing more of what you've done. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Absolutely, absolutely. I guess the way that I interpret that is you're here, you want to go here, all right? You have a plan to go from here to here, and then you have to monitor your activity. That's sweat equity that Brother Rambo's talking about. Monitor your activity. If your activity is always going, the other things will happen. Now, if you get to the point to where you're expecting to get here and the activity is not happening, that that's the what definition of insanity.
Yeah, doing the same thing, expecting different
Right,
results.
right. So
And you're right, and I think that some of our viewers, and as I said earlier, some may be young people, some may be the adults of young people, but whatever the case may be, people fail to recognize sometimes, or they take for granted, that the lack of action is an action. The lack of doing is an action. It is an action because it is the reverse of what life is doing. Life is moving forward with or without you. And so by choosing not to do, being apathetic, allowing oneself to operate from a place of mediocrity, that means kind of being so-so. I'm not going to be like 100%, I'm going to give you 60%. Well, 60% means that somebody else is doing the other 40%, and that's why you standing in the same place not getting what you want. So the realities come from being able to do more than just the average. You want to really go that extra yard. You want to make yourself a person who they can't be without. It's indispensable. So in the workplace, when you're getting a job, you don't be the person who's doing like everybody else. You want to do what they're doing, but then do 10 or 20%
there's
more.
always a place for excellence.
Excellence
Always
is
a place
a
for
habit,
excellence.
not an event. You must do it all the time.
I talk about it all the time. Excellence is our defense. And it's interesting that you point that out as far as the not giving just 50 or 60% and things like that, because right now in this area, the Twin Cities area, the air is so thick, and there's so much stress and burden and weight and so many distractions. And matter of fact, I know that it weighs heavy on a lot of people, and it can take away their focus. It can take away their focus. All the things going on. I'll tell you what. Growing up in Minneapolis, I don't think that I would have ever saw the day where somebody could say Minneapolis right now may be the epicenter of racism and discrimination in the world. In the world. Somebody could say that right now, and you'd have to think, and you're like, well, probably, there's something to that. I know there's a lot to chew on and a lot of layers to peel back on that onion. But right now, this is heavy. Right, I get calls, and I know you do too, from friends and associates from throughout the country. What's going on there? What's going on there? You know what, bro? I'm gonna let you just start wherever you want to start. We're not gonna be able to dissect that whole thing today, but just whatever comments you have about it.
Yeah. Well, I firmly believe that you're referring to and talking, as you pointed out, about the nature of what racism and what the nature of the civil unrest and the injustices that have been waged against African Americans, black and brown bodies in ways that are disproportionate and that are clearly demonstrated, and there's a sense of tremendous challenge in front of each of us. Right now, we're living in a state where the disparities amongst African Americans and whites in education, in housing, in financial acuity, that means your financial well-being and knowledge, all of those things are we are at such a we're not at a disadvantage, we are just disinformed, and we have limited access to the resources that allow us to be the best that we can be. Right now, we're looking at a space that, because of the events that took place most recently, so most specifically the George Floyd public lynching. I call it a public lynching.
It is a public lynching.
Because of the nature of what happened and how it was reverberated through video. And
you got a man looking into the camera with his
mom.
hands in his pocket, with his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for roughly 9 minutes.
Yeah.
Other than lynching, what can you call it?
I don't know what people call it murder, but it's more than that.
Yes,
it's more than that.
That's true.
And so what are we going to do? There's something to be said about, as I said earlier, omission, that is not doing something, is commission. omission. Omitting something, not doing it, is committing. It's adding to those who would have you believe that they're your oppressors are not your oppressors. And we have to recognize, as Malcolm X said, just because they ain't behind you don't mean they ain't after you. And so just because you don't see the reflection in the rearview mirror of what you believe are those who are empowered, emblazoned, emboldened to behave in certain kinds of ways, we have to realize that when we look behind ourselves, we need to look for other brothers who look like us and sisters, and not only allies but accomplices, people who want to put skin in the game, who understand that if their actions do not come back with the same sort of, that don't meet ours, that they will go down too. That's an accomplice. Accomplice is like out on the streets. If your boy says he's an ally, he can stand and watch you and say, "Go, brother, go." But if he's an accomplice, he's out there doing the same thing you're doing, so that if the man come, you both going down. An ally can go, "I'll call your mama. I make sure that the lawyers show up." We need folks who are willing to go down with us and who are willing to fight with us side by side. And so we look at the situations that are going on right now. And while Brother James here mentioned it's the epicenter, the reality for me is recognizing that, yes, this is where it has revealed itself. But just like the whole, what we call glacier principle, the glacier principle is that the peak of a glacier is just simply like a pimple on your face, and below it is a huge, it's like 98% more of what the glacier is. Mm-hmm. And so what happened, what festered like dead meat here in Minnesota, was something that caused a pimple on the face of American culture, and that grew into a boil, into a canker, into a cancer. And now we're seeing that cancer, we're seeing the impact that it's having upon all of us, nationally, state, locally, and regionally, nationally, and internationally. And so we have to do something. We have to act up, act out, act a fool, but we have to act. And so I really encourage people, when I say act a fool, that does not mean damaging and pillaging and looting our own businesses or decimating our communities, because we need to have that sort of infrastructure so that we can move on with the return on our investment. We need to get into community. We need to restructure policing. We need to restructure our communities, restructure our political leaders, and make sure that we're making a difference by making sure we vote, by making sure we speak up. We're making sure that we get the education that we need for ourselves, young people who are watching, and for our community members.
Very well said, brother. That is powerful. Powerful.
We are powerful people, which
we
is
are.
Why I think that why I commend you for doing this program, because I think what it does, I am certain of what it does. I'm confident that it changes and touches lives. And if we can touch one person viewing to believe that they have the power to do something for themselves, thereby in turn doing something for their family or household, in turn doing something for their block, their community, their city, and then for themselves, it's a powerful thing.
Absolutely powerful. I want to just jump on that, and I guess the one thing that I just want to remind everybody of is let's not get too distracted.
No,
okay, let's not get too distracted with just everything that's going on, all the injustices and things like that, because I know that it feels like just blood running up through your head. I know that. I understand that. I feel all of that too. But at the same time, I think it's critical to keep our eye on the prize. I know when Gary Hines was on here in a previous episode, he talked about the greatness that we have within us, and we really do. Mm-hmm. And we've been tricked. Mm-hmm. We've been tricked.
Bamboozled.
To think that we're something less than that. That we don't really understand just how great this melanin is, in whatever shade it is. Mm-hmm. And so much of that. And so I just want to encourage everybody to just stay focused. Stay focused on positivity. Like Brother Rambo said, yeah, we got a lot of work to do, and we're going to put in the work. But at the same time, we're going to do it the right way. We're not going to destroy any of our businesses. And last year, that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, is literally standing in front of black businesses so that they wouldn't get burned down. Now, I'm not saying that it was our young people doing it. We know that there's all type of nefarious organizations coming in here from the far left and the far right, and that whole thing gets quite complicated. But all you young people out there, just be mindful. Do not destroy our stuff if something happens. Hopefully, we can get a conviction here. What are your thoughts on that, Brother Rambo?
Well, there are 12 people who have been charged with the task of speaking the minds, the hearts, and the sentiment of an entire community, of a city, of a state, of a nation. And I have to trust that they have received the best information possible based on the attorney, the prosecuting attorney, to return with the outcome that would make Mr. I will call him Chauvin, guilty of as charged. That's
How about guilty as was, as is.
As is. Yeah, and so what I concern myself with is it's just like any tragic or challenging situation, we have to have the backup plan for if it doesn't come back the way we want. So how do we behave if that isn't what happens? I think we need to think as much about that as we put energy toward what happens if he is found guilty. Because the positive thought that we may have as a collective community wanting justice to be served for George Floyd, we have to recognize that justice has not been served to so many black and brown bodies, that it's very clear that history has shown us that what is clear to the eye may not be clear to the powers that be, and could result in something that may not be to our liking, or might not be something that reflects what we have seen and what we believe. So we have to believe enough to, as James pointed out, really be mindful of what we're doing and what we will do when this all comes together, which is going to be in the next week or two, I think. The verdict will come down. I know the closing arguments are today. And then I would suspect they'd go into it, and they would go in
this week sometime.
Sometime this week, yeah.
Right, and it's just a matter of how long it takes to come back with that. And so a lot of people will be waiting, anticipating to see what that will be. And it only compounds things more that, we're still waiting for the Derek Chauvin murder or lynching of George Floyd case to come to its conclusion, and then we get this young brother murdered out in Brooklyn Center, and it just keeps coming.
Dante Wright.
It just keeps
and then
coming.
We sadly have it in a community that many of our viewers from Minnesota either hail from originally or have family in Chicago with Adam Toledo, 13 years old, shot when responding to the direction of an officer.
Turned around with his hands up and got shot.
Right. So we really have to guard ourselves from making decisions. We want every person viewing, 12 to 20 to 20 more years of age, to know that we want you to come home at the end of each day safely, by any means necessary. Because you can't be an agent for change or a warrior for the world if you are underneath the ground. And if that means that you have to acquiesce, that means if you have to say, sir, get home. You can go to an attorney and we can get the case and we can try it later. But if you don't make it home, there's nothing we can do.
And we teach that to our kids.
Yeah,
we teach that to our kids. They're not kids anymore. They're all well into their 20s. But and the interesting thing about it, we get 3 girls and a young man, and he's 27. We still go over these things with him. We still, you're lucky my wife's not here. And I, bless his heart, because My wife is intense.
Mm.
I mean, she is intense, and she's just constantly reminding him, constantly. But that's, I read something the other day that one of my friends posted. It says that we pray for our sons differently.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
we pray differently.
And with that sort of vision or sentiment about praying differently, I think that we as black men and we as a community have to step into the gaps, step into the spaces, and make sure that as we pray that we don't, that particularly with having three daughters, that we remember the significance and the importance of making sure that our young women and girls and daughters and nieces and granddaughters make it home safely and that they're getting the same messaging. Because I don't ever want it to be believed as some. I have a sister, and I think one of the things that she said was that when she was growing up, she felt like she was raised and that the boys in our family were loved, and that's a sentiment held by many women.
You hear that a lot.
And I think it's because our culture tells us that young women need to have certain information and behave in certain ways that is not necessarily what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. So in some ways, it's shared that the perception is that there's certain codes of conduct. So it's not it's not double edged. It's a double edged sword. What he can do, I can't do, and all those things. So I just want to make sure that the women who and the young girls and the young women who are watching understand that we value you, that we support you, we lift you up, and that you are not forgotten, and that you are remembered, and you are vital, and you are the birth channel for our communities. That you are the fertile field that will make sure our communities flourish and thrive. And so you have to have brilliant people lifting you up.
Well, they're the mother of all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they're the mother of all.
That's right.
They are the mother of all.
Yeah. So it's a double conversation.
Just one last thing I want to make, and I don't want to keep up too much time, brother, because I know you're crazy busy. But one of the things that I guess just is obvious, is the elephant in the room, but it still gnaws at me, is the fact that I want to someday believe that I can hear a message on the news and not know automatically, without even seeing it, that they're black or white. For example, you have a mass murderer, okay? And this mass murder takes place and the suspect makes it into custody alive, unharmed, without even looking at the TV. I always know that's a white person. You will have a police shooting, okay? And the victim is shot, murdered, never had a chance to make it to custody, jail, or anything like that. How come I always know that those are young African American men? What not? You see what I'm saying? I want something, or at least at some point in America here, to be able to not automatically accurately identify this without knowing it. Because all of these, as far as I can see now, unless you or somebody else can tell me different, in every one of these scenarios, I think you can change the color and you change the outcome. I'll give you an example. Justine Diamond, okay? What is it? Mohammed Noor, the officer that accidentally shot her. I mean, I don't think there's someone that can reasonably say, oh yeah, he saw this woman and he just wanted to just shoot her.
Right.
No, it was
clearly an accident.
An accident, questionable judgment, so forth. Okay. Well, he is the only officer in the history of the state of Minnesota that's ever been convicted. Now, you cannot tell me that it's coincidental that it's a black officer shooting a white victim, okay? There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of black men that have been murdered by white officers. Not a single one of them has ever been convicted and gone to jail in this state of Minnesota. As Brother Spike Moss would say, Minnesota has a perfect record. A perfect record.
Which is despicable at best. And I don't know that I can really add any clarity to that or anything more
But
than
do
just
you agree with that?
corroborating it. I would corroborate. I would agree that there's something to be said about the fact that well, the media is just a microcosm of the world at large. It just reflects back as a mirror to those who view it, those of us who view it, what the world, what our culture has provided for us, and that is the imbalance, the the the, the lack of equity, the lack of fairness, the lack of access, and so the news plays back to us what media has in itself created, which is this image of black males and black females as people to be either afraid of or black women are angry or black men are going to steal from you or any of those sorts of things. And so until we can really break down the systems and the structural racism in our culture, we will continue to be able to do what you just referred to, be able to predict the outcome of who the person is based on what they're reporting on without even watching.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think about just the brother whose name now escapes me sadly, who rammed the barrier at the White House, at the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
You think of all those promise keepers and all those folks
Left unharmed.
and
Unharmed.
he rammed in the barrier with a knife,
Mm-hmm.
and that brother never made it home.
Oh, well, that's my point.
I know.
That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on January 6th, the insurrection at the Capitol, I mean, they basically were almost just escorted.
Free reign.
And I guess the point that I made, and me and my wife, we just talk about some of this stuff just privately, is that the value subconsciously and consciously is not the same, and it's not just whites, it's blacks also.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because literally, we know that we can't run from the police without getting murdered, okay? And that's their expectation is if it's a white guy, you know what, we're not gonna murder him. We'll try something less lethal. If it's a black guy, oh, how I dare you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't want to overly belabor, but belabor is be redundant saying overly belabor. But there was a video that a buddy of mine sent me. That was a YouTube video, and some of you may have even seen this. You may have as well about the white driver who was pulled over by the police. He had a gun on the seat next to him, and the officer asked him to put his hands outside the window. He told the officer what he wasn't going to do, what he would not do, what his rights were.
Mm-hmm.
He closed his door on the officers, both who had their guns drawn, shut his door on them, and drove off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not
And how about the black lieutenant in Virginia?
In Virginia, who just
in uniform.
In uniform.
A lieutenant, officer.
No less.
Military officer.
Right?
No weapons, not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And felt the need to pull over into a lighted area to be safe. Right. And got tased. A military officer that protects this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so I think, the moral, if a moral is even appropriate to apply to a moral to this, is that we have work to do. We can't step away from the importance of recognizing what we all can do. We can't do everything, but we can do something. And something that each of us has to do. If you are 12, make sure that you're doing everything you can to read the information that's being given to you by your teachers. If you aren't able to read the way that you feel that you can achieve the goals that you want, seek out someone, an adult, a family member, a family friend, to help support you to be the best person you can be. If you're a teenager leaving high school, college may not be for you, but know that there are ways that you can make a fantastic career for yourselves by being committed, being focused, as James put out, having James said earlier, being focused. Don't get distracted. If you're an adult and you say to get a master's degree so I can get to the next level of my job, it's going to take 5 years. Well, check this out. 5 years will pass whether you go get that degree or not. So you might as well go ahead and get that degree and stop playing. So recognize that wherever you are on this journey of life, there's something you can do, because your best self means you can do the best things possible for our community. So I'm really encouraging everyone watching to not give up. And as Gary Hines would probably have said, as the Sounds of Blackness so poignantly put, be optimistic. Be optimistic. Be a pragmatic optimist. To be pragmatic is to be planful, purposeful, insightful. Pragmatist.
Purposeful, insightful.
You know, and so to be an optimist is to believe it can happen. So be a pragmatic. Don't, you know, so you have to be realistic. That's what a pragmatist is someone who's realistic. So be real about your goals and setting them. Be an optimist about your ability to achieve them, and you can make things happen. You can make things happen.
There you go. There you go. There you go. That's a lot of meat. Thank you, Brother Rambo.
Thank you.
You have been a blessing, a mighty blessing.
We've had our shots.
You've been a mighty blessing. Thank you so much. We love you, brother.
Thank you.
And I know that they love you out there for your wonderful message. And you guys, as always, continue. Pray for us, and we'll pray for you. Okay? And Black Lion and Brother Rambo, we're out.